Good morning and welcome to another edition of Elevenses. You're watching Kevin Williams here. Settle back with a cuppa and a biscuit, and we'll cover 15 minutes of topical news, sometimes controversial views, and better biking tips. I see we have absolutely no live viewers at the moment, but I'm sure some will pop in later, and I know people are catching up with this as well on the either on the stream here later today or over on YouTube. Anyway, let's carry on today's webcast. What have we got? DVSA test booking system collapses again. Zeros are on tour. There's an electric Royal Enfield rumour, which I'll tell you about later. Stevenage have removed bikes from the proposed cruise ban, which is a bit of good news for bikers. I'll show you a rather nice Royal Enfield cafe racer, which I rather fancy myself. And at the end of the show, I'll just run through some tips about riding in strong winds. So stay with me for the next 15 minutes. Don't forget, if you've got anything to say about anything that I talk about, I do like feedback on these shows. Drop me a line, questions, comments, anything you like, anything you don't like. I'm always happy to hear it. Suggestions for future shows as well. Any tips you'd like to hear, drop me a line. I'm more than happy to get back to you on those. All right, so okay, DVSA's test booking system has gone down. Bookings for car tests were supposed to reopen last week in England. Bike bookings have been available in theory for some weeks already, but as soon as they opened it up for car instructors, the system crashed under the weight of people trying to book tests. And the DVSA announced, they said, following problems with the driving test booking service, it's currently unavailable, so we can carry out essential work to deal with the unprecedented test booking demand. Now, you would rather think that after 5 months of no driving tests, the demand would have been actually rather predictable, but hey ho. The DVSA duly announced that they would close the system till 8 a.m. this morning, Wednesday 26th of August, while they worked on it, and they apologised for any inconvenience caused. But by 9 a.m. this morning, a tweet was already up on their Twitter account, and it was advising trainers to try again and be patient, and that 36,000 plus tests were available. You know, it's all very well telling people to be patient, but trainers don't have all day to sit around at their computer trying to log on to their account and trying to book non-existent tests. They actually have a job to do. This has been going on for weeks now with motorcycle tests, with trainers booking in the moment the system opens and finding that there are no available tests. So, you know, it's the DVSA's preparations for resumption of tests, quite frankly, is making driving tests, trainers' work almost impossible. Anyway, on a little bit more positive note, Zero motorcycles are on tour, and their blurb says that bikers will have no opportunity to test ride the Californian company's range of all electric motorcycles. And the tour actually kicks off tomorrow at their dealership Classic Motorcycles, which is in Cheshire. So that's Thursday, August the 27th. And it runs for the best part of a month, finishing on Friday, September the 18th. So you've got plenty of time to get out and get on to find one. You can meet the bikes at 16 different venues across England, Scotland and Wales. And you'll get the chance to try out models from the Zero range on a short guided test ride. It's pre-booking's not required, but they do recommend that you do that. And you can head either to their the Zero website, which is zeromotorcycles.com, en hyphen GB and /events. Or you can contact the host dealership directly. I'll just put that into the comment stream actually, so that you can see it a bit more clearly. Here we go. So there's the URL to contact Zero. Frankly, if you've never tried an electric motorcycle before, I would give one a go. I was able to visit the roadshow last year. I had the chance to ride a couple of their bikes. The the standard one that they came out with a couple of years ago, which has got a top speed of about 85 miles an hour, and the ZRF, I think it was, which is the high performance bike. And boy, I can tell you that one gets a shift on when you run it in full power mode and you twist that throttle, it goes. Don't be fooled by the relatively low top speeds. The thing about these bikes is that they get to the speed that you want them to get to very quickly. Even the relatively modest, I think it's the DS model, it gets there with, surprisingly fast. And don't be fooled by the range either. Yes, if you use full power flat out everywhere all the time, you won't get a great deal of range. But I was calculating, I was watching what the battery meter was doing, and I reckon that these things are good for sort of 100+ miles. Now, okay, that's not going to trouble you if you've got an FJ 1300 sitting in the garage and you can carry half a tanker load of fuel on your BMW. But for most people, for most purposes, these bikes are starting to become practical. I could almost use one now for training. I need a range, a predictable range of about 140 miles, I reckon, to do a training course, get there and get home. And they're getting there, not quite there yet, but they're not far off. Okay, so sticking with electric motorcycles for a moment, Royal Enfield have confirmed that they're actually working on the development of their own model, and it's expected to slot into sort of the affordable middle range style of bike as well. Royal Enfield's CEO, Vinod Dasari, has actually confirmed development has begun with the prototypes. And he says it's not about whether electric will come or not, but it's a question of when. We did make some prototypes. We looked at several segments, and we'll be adding to the team in the near future. Royal Enfield has actually been a massive success story. They have shown growth from around 50,000 motorcycles built in 2010 to almost 1 million in 2019. And it's pretty enormous growth in an industry which hasn't actually been doing all that well for the last few years. Compare and contrast with Harley Davidson, I was talking about in an earlier show. Royal Enfield's move to electric motorcycles could be particularly interesting, I think, because the companies tended to focus on smaller cc affordable motorcycles that have basically been moderately powered and retro styled, and the new twin cylinder 650 engine really fits into that marketing model, but it's sold remarkably well. Many electric startups have actually been forced to opt for low volume, high performance electric motorcycles that can justify a premium price. There are a lot of stories about the sort of rocket ship electric bikes, but have you ever seen one? I haven't. At the other end are the low power models, which keep costs down to the consumer by using smaller electric motors and batteries. And these are starting to appear. Most days now when I'm out on the bike in London, I will see one or more electric scooters or low power electric bikes around. So they are getting out there. There are relatively few, though, that are affordable in the mid-range. Zero are, almost there, but they're a little bit pricey, a little bit top end in their performance bracket. But, perhaps if Royal Enfield can leverage their existing volume production, and they may be able to open up an entirely new area of affordable mid-range electric motorcycles. So keep an eye on that and see what happens. Don't forget you're watching Elevenses live with Kevin Williams of Survival Skills. Now, whilst on the topic of interesting motorcycles, I'll just set the screen share up again. There we go. Last week, I mentioned a rather nice custom Royal Enfield, a cafe racer styled along the lines of the Triumph Thruston, based on that new 650 twin engine that's proving to be a big seller, which means it's basically affordable. But Nigel Abel said it's not a Moto Guzzi. Right, okay, there you are, Nigel. There is a Moto Guzzi, and that's one I quite like the look of. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Guzzis, even though I've never actually owned one myself. And I've wondered why for many years. Why it is that with the current sort of popularity of heritage bikes, Guzzi have never brought back the Le Mans. They've got the low-cost V7 platform. It looks the part. It would be relatively easy to fit a Le Mans-style body kit on it, and I think Bob's your uncle. I think it would be a huge seller. But anyway, there we go. There's a custom that gets close. It's called an Endurance Racer, and it's designed to hark back to a Moto Guzzi machine that covered a record distance in 24 hours, quite a few years ago now, back in the 1970s. It's basically a body kit on a fairly standard V7.3, which means that you're looking at a pretty affordable motorcycle there. The only thing I'd really want to do with that bike is to swap out those wire wheels for the cast ones that are found on some of the V7 models. You can get a pair of those for under £1,000 brand new, so I'm sure you could find someone who would be willing to do a swap wire to cast. Yeah, 47 horsepower thereabouts for those bikes. They're not rocket ships, but 47 horsepower is enough to give you quite a bit of fun on the road if you're not looking for ultimate top end. Let's bring myself back. There we go. All right. If you are looking for something to read, you can head over to my Spotlight page at Lulu, and my books are on sale. I'll be putting up a 15% off voucher, which will be available for a day or so later. So keep an eye open for that. Have a look at the books and see if you can do some reading if you are still sort of a bit short on riding. Right, okay. Still to come, I'll be talking about riding in strong winds. But first of all, last bit of news for today. You may remember from a show a few days ago that Stevenage Council were trying to bring in a car cruise ban, and under that broad brush ban, they would have covered motorcycles. And there was a lot of worry about bike gatherings and ride-outs in the borough being made illegal by that, but it appears that motorcyclists can breathe again. Details are a bit sketchy at the moment, but the council appear to have accepted representations from bike groups. I know there was a big petition, online petition presented, but they appear to have accepted that motorcycles were being swept up in a sort of broad brush aimed at preventing the car groups from gathering in big meets. So as a result, the reference to motorcycles was withdrawn from the application at the very last moment. The application was to make it an arrestable offence to participate in a car cruise, namely to be either the driver or a passenger in a motor vehicle in one of these big gatherings. Anyone else at the cruise, incidentally, whether you're a spectator or just happen to be in the area, you would not be subject to arrest. So it's only the people in the vehicles themselves. And this has all been precipitated by a couple of incidents, including a bad crash where two cars collided while drivers were performing, and injured 18 people, some quite seriously. That was last year. The hearing was held at Luton Crown Court by the District Judge Baljinder Gill, and the reserve judgment on the hearing, so it's been postponed pending a decision on the case. But motorcycles are out of the frame completely, so breathe safely if you're a Stevenage biker. Right, I promised to round off the with a little bit of news about, or a riding tip really, about riding in strong winds. The wind's dropped a bit this morning, but it's still breezy out there. But you know, if you've been out on the bike in the last couple of days, you probably noticed that it has been particularly windy. This is the result of a couple of sort of ex-hurricanes. One of the features of our weather is that hurricanes that form in the middle of the Atlantic and swing out initially towards the Caribbean and the east coast of the United States, if they don't actually cross into the mainland, what they'll often do is they will run up the coastline off the coast of the USA, and then they get caught up in the jet stream, which steers weather at us for most of the year. And these big storms, although they're no longer technically hurricanes, they still contain a lot of power when they arrive on our shores. And that, as you probably noticed, we had a lot of wind from 2 different storms over the last few days. And this hurricane season is shaping up to be one of the busiest for many years. There are a lot of storms already, and the forecast is for a lot more storms due to the way the water temperatures are at the moment. It's the water temperature which tends to power these big storms. So it's likely we're going to get a lot more windy weather through the latter part of the summer and into the autumn. So riding in strong winds is something that you do need a little bit of a special technique for. And the most important thing is to use what I've talked about in the past, which I call the brace position. And this is basically where you lock yourself onto the bike with your knees and you keep everything from your hips upwards fairly loose. So the top half of your body is flexible. And most importantly, you don't use the handlebars as a grab rail on the bike. You don't try to hang on to the handlebars. You lock yourself onto the machine with your knees. Once you do that, what you'll find is that you can sway around on the bike independently of your hand position. So your hands effectively stay still, but your top half of your body moves around. You will be blown around on the bike by the wind. You cannot stop that. But what you can do is you can reduce the effect that has on the machine itself. If you lock in with your knees and you uncouple, as it were, your arms from your wrists, then you can sway on top of the machine without feeding that movement straight back into the steering. A lot of the problems that riders have on windy days is that they are being blown around on the bike, but they're trying to use the handlebars themselves to hold onto the machine. And of course, what happens is as they get blown around, the bars move and then the bike moves too in ways that we don't want it to. Anything else? Well, if you've got a side wind, then the top of the motorcycle will be blown sideways. It has to. The tires are gripping the road. So as the wind blows from one side or the other, the bike will tend to lean away from the wind. So what we have to do is we have to counter steer into the breeze. And if you've got a strong, steady wind coming from one direction, what you can do, what I find quite useful, is actually to sit slightly skew on the seat. So I just shuffle around slightly. So I'm not sitting square onto the bike, but I actually sit sort of slightly side onto the bike. And what that does is it kind of shortens the arm on the side that the wind is coming from. And that makes it a little bit easier to apply a constant counter steering pressure to hold the bike against the wind. The worst ride I ever had, well, there were 2 actually that I can recall for strong winds. One was down the length of the Mojave Desert. That was about 175 miles. Wind was about 45 miles per hour. It doesn't sound very strong, 40 or 45 miles per hour, but trust me, when you are side on to a wind on a dead straight and completely unsheltered road for 170 odd miles, it is absolutely crippling, because you don't realize just how much pressure you're putting onto the handlebar until the miles start to build up, and eventually the whole muscles all down the side start to burn. And the only way I could hold that pressure was, as I say, to sort of squizzle my bum around a bit, shorten the reach to the bar, and enable me to press on one side with a bit less extension of the arm and a bit less effort. And that enabled me to get to the end of that ride without too much trouble. The other ride into it with a strong side wind was somewhat different because the wind was gusty and it was unpredictable, and I was also riding through an area where the shelter came and went, and that was down the length of the coast from sort of Calais area down towards Rouen in northern France. Only about 100 miles on this occasion, but I was actually aiming for Bayeux. We had a weekend planned in Bayeux and we didn't get there. I had to give up at Rouen and find a hotel room because I was absolutely shattered after just 100 miles of trying to restrain the bike. And now you have to be really quite careful because it's the big gusts that take the bike sideways. Now, you cannot predict what the wind is going to do on a gusty day, except predict that it's going to be gusty. But what you can do is you can look for areas that you'll be caught by the wind. So if you're riding through an area with shelter on either side, and then suddenly there's a gap in the middle that the wind can come through, that's where you'll be caught by the wind. Anything else to think about? Watch out for the wind bouncing off the front of a truck. Trucks come at you at some speed, and if the road's not very wide, they push the air out of the way as they move, and added to a side wind, that can amount to a pretty hefty shove away from them. And one other thing that I'll just mention before I sign off for today: be cautious overtaking trucks on windy days too, because particularly if you're into a headwind, that'll have two problems. The first thing is that you won't have as much acceleration as you're expecting. Even a fairly powerful bike will be hit fairly dramatically by a strong headwind. If you think about it, it's the wind that pretty much determines the top speed of a motorcycle. So if you're riding into a 40-mile-per-hour headwind, it will knock a significant amount off your top speed, and that will affect your acceleration, of course. So be cautious of overtaking on a windy day. But the other thing is you will find that there's a wind pattern around the truck, and it's quite an odd one, because as you come out from the slipstream where you will be pulled along, you will hit the wind coming the other way, and that's when the bike will suffer. If you've got a low-powered bike, it really is noticeable. But as you get alongside the truck, you'll find that there's actually a low pressure zone. So here's the truck, there's you overtaking it, and what tends to happen is the bike gets sucked in towards the wheels of the truck. Now, just as you compensate for that by steering away again, you meet the air that is actually coming around the front of the truck, which blows you away from it. So there are some real interesting aerodynamic effects as you go around trucks. And of course, once you're clear of the truck, you're back into the headwind as well. So it tends to make you slow down just when you're least expecting it. So be cautious on windy days. Give yourself more time. Don't try to ride so fast. Look out for gaps in between buildings, in hedges, gateways, all that kind of thing. All those will be where you get caught by a side wind. And even if you've got a headwind, it's quite tiring to ride into, but be particularly careful when overtaking. Right, okay, that is enough for today. Don't forget to set a reminder. Elevenses is on Wednesdays and Sundays at 11, and I will always bring you some topical news and some views about what's going on out there in the world, and I will mostly put in some better biking tips as well. So once again, thank you very much for looking in, and I hope to see you on the next show. Bye for now.